May we presume to say that at thy birth new joy was sprung in heaven as well as here on earth? For sure the milder planets did combine on thy auspicious horoscope to shine, and even the most malicious were in trine. Thy brother angels at thy birth strung each his lyre and tuned it high, that all the people of the sky might know a poetess was born on earth. And then if ever mortal ears had heard the music of the spheres, we read Dryden to the pious memory of Anne Killigrew, reading from the Untuning of the Sky, Days of Music in English Poetry. This is page 402. Dryden's treatment of the theme of speculative music, taken out of context, the opening of the third stanza of his great ode. Maybe we should read the entire ode. It's only the third stanza. To the pious memory of the accomplished young lady, Miss Anne Killigrew, excellent in the two sister arts of prosody and painting, might have been thought to resemble some of the complementary epigrams treated previously in this chapter. She has skill at poetry and painting, and Dryden says, "May we presume to say that at thy birth new joy was sprung in heaven as well as here on earth? For sure the milder planets did combine on thy auspicious horoscope to shine, and even the most malicious were in trine. Thy brother angels at thy birth strung each his lyre and tuned it high, that all the people of the sky might know a poetess was born on earth. And then, if ever mortal ears had heard the music of the spheres," he's talking about music of the spheres, but the superficial resemblance pales into the insignificance before the poem's splendid elaboration of the theme of the angelic, the strict correspondence of poetry and music. We're talking about the sister arts, the brother and sister. Poetry and music throughout, and the final commendation of the earthly art itself, towards which the whole elegiac structure moves. The music of the spheres. The music of the spheres is no mere mechanical intruded gesture of praise here, but has been prepared for in the first stanza's closing supplication. Here then, a mortal muse, thy praise rehearsed in no ignoble verse, but such as thy voice did practice here, when thy first fruits of prosody were given, to make thyself a welcome inmate there, while yet a young probationer and candidate of heaven. The traditional relationship between musica, instrumentalis, practical music at its most specific, and the musica mundana, of celestial generality, is here applied to the Anne Killigrew's life of art practice. Seems to have the weight of both meanings here. The whole poem employs angels, earth, heaven, the traditional angelic activity of singing in substitution, in a way, with the conventions of pastoral elegy, and if conceit of the heavenly choir is deemed overly conventional, It is because of its conventionality that can be employed in such a way as it is here. Professor Tilliard has raised the issue of sincerity with respect to just this point about the angelic singing, but he sees quite rightly, I think, how if, quote, there is no piety in his Dryden's references to heavenly music, yet though through them he demonstrates how sincerely he prizes the practice of the arts on this earth. The point is that Dryden is able to make use of such references precisely because they are unbelieved. Precisely because music can function consistently as a surrogate for both painting and poetry, with none of the engagement of questions of belief that are occasioned for by praising an actual singer, by equating her music with that of the universe. Is there music in the universe, or celestial music? Dryden, of course, also capable in his verses on the death of Mr. Purcell. That's very good, Mr. Purcell. Dryden wrote, he should write, Henry Purcell is a very good composer. Written 1 year before his Alexander Feast of Employing of the music of the spheres. We're talking about the sound current, or the nam, or word, the logos, in a fairly traditional complementary way. The lines were set to music. Now they have Mr. Blow, John Blow, Dr. John Blow, writing music for Purcell's funeral. Master to the famous Mr. Henry Purcell, as his tomb in Westminster Abbey rightfully attests. He is the student of Purcell, and it is interesting to note that at the end of the first stanza, Dryden was preparing some of his techniques for the Alexander Feast. We shall see shortly how the elaborate repetitions of phrase in the latter were contrived to meet the exigencies of the kind of setting that the text would receive. The line, and listening and silent, and silent and listening and silent obey, prefigures this sort of repetition in a way in which nothing in the first ode does. The conventionalities of perfect musicianship enter at the middle of the second stanza, although they are rather nicely tied to an Orphean conceit. We're talking about Orpheus, which operates through the comparison of heaven and earth rather than of earth and heaven, the old device of the practical musician outdoing. This is a cliché, where the earthly musician tries to outdo the heavenly choir. Is unmistakably at work here. We beg not how our Orpheus to restore, had he been there, their sovereign sphere had sent him back before. The power of harmony too well they knew. He long ere ever this had tuned their jarring sphere, and left no hell below. If you get in touch with the tuned up, the jarring, the music of the spheres, you could have left no hell below. We beg our hell, our Orpheus to restore, had he been there, their sovereign sphere had sent him back there before. The power of harmony. There's a lot of power too well, they knew. They knew. He long ever this had tuned the jarring sphere, and left no hell below. The heavenly choir, who heard his notes from high, let down the scale of music from the sky. They handed him along, and all the way he taught, and all the way they sung. Maybe this is about Henry Purcell, the Heavenly Choir. They may have heard his music. The Heavenly Choir, who heard his notes from high, let down the scale music from the sky. They handed him along, and all the way he taught, all the way they sung. Amazing. There's undoubtedly an increment of dramatic power produced by the use of the underworld motive and tuning the jarring sphere as more literary plausibility in the sense that the customary silencing of the sweet heavenly one would have. The image at the beginning of the final stanza suggests that Professor Toyota characterizes as the outrageous assertion that Anne Killigrew would lead the poetic throng to heaven. But the notion that the quasi-deified Purcell is quasi-deified Henry Purcell will ascend to heaven along a ladder of perfection that is so named as to suggest one of the music gamut. Once a musical gamut, in the Greek sense, the harmonia. Or here we have Parnassum to the gradus ad Parnassum. He's going to be taken up to the Mount Parnassus. Of diligent practice, of devoted effort, is extremely effective in music. The problems that Dryden faced in the composition of the 1684 song for St. Cecilia's Day was virtually the same as those faced by Oldham and the other writers of the text who had preceded him, but other impulses were at work. In his case, there was this marvelous gift of exposition, particularly summarizing that triumph in the dismissive conclusion of the secular mosque, whereas Diana, Mars, and Venus, representing the three squire courts, are appropriately and schematically reproduced. All of a piece throughout. Thy chase had a beast in view, though thy wars brought nothing about. Thy lovers were all untrue. 'Tis well, and old age is out, and time to begin anew. We are reading the poetry of Dryden, and the power of harmony. Too well they knew. About Henry Purcell, who was quasi-deified, rightly so, being a great composer by his student John Blow. And Dryden, we read Dryden's poetry, some of the other stuff about the music of the spheres in the Untuning of the Sky.